Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. Your host, a behavioral scientist and bachelor, talks to leading experts and successful singles about living solo and living well. Travel more, make things, sleep in when you want to. Here's the playbook for the person who is unapologetically unattached. Now, please welcome Dr. Peter McGraw.
Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Shannon Ables. Shannon is the founder and editor of the lifestyle blog, The Simply Luxurious Life, established in 2009, which inspired her first book, which I've read, Choosing the Simply Luxurious Life, a modern woman's guide, that was published in 2014. It also inspired her second book, also I've read it, Living the Simply Luxurious Life, Making Your Everydays Extraordinary and Discovering Your Best Self, published in 2018. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a third one coming. She lives in Bend, Oregon since 2015 with her two spaniels, Oscar and Norman. Welcome, Shannon.
Oh, thanks for having me, Peter.
Pleasure to have you here. And we are joined by a return guest co-host, Lily Rains. Lily is a storyteller, arts educator, crafter of needlework, and maker of homemade ice cream. I want to hear what flavors. I still don't know the flavors she specializes in. Though solo, Lily loves to be part of an ensemble with a shared goal, be it on a softball field, an escape room, or getting a play, movie, or TV show made. And you are doing that right now. Lily, you took a little break, didn't you?
I sure did.
Welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me. I love you.
You're so sweet. What is your go-to homemade ice cream that you make?
Right now, I have thin mint chip ice cream.
Oh,
so
that's a winner.
Supporting the Girl Scouts with the amount of boxes of Thin Mints I bought, but it's for the greater good, guys. It's for the greater good. It's not about me. It's about the Girl Scouts. We're just all benefiting.
And Shannon, what is your go-to ice cream flavor to eat?
Ooh, I just started enjoying one from a local, we make gelato, they have a gelato company here in Ponta, and they have Tumalo lavender vanilla. They just add a little bit of lavender to vanilla, just a hint of it. Just so good.
That's
simple.
the kind of thing a woman who wrote Choosing the Simply Luxurious Life would say.
I'm shopping local, too. I mean, I'm bringing a brand from Bend to the world, right? Bonta.com. God, I love them. They're great.
Well, they're looking for a sponsor. I know a pod. So we are here. Oh, I think this is fitting, the way we started this, because we are here to talk about taste and about developing taste. And I want to put an emphasis on this idea of developing taste. That is that your taste, so to speak, is not fixed. Right? So for example, I'm not a big fan of lavender, but might I develop a taste for it? I have some ideas how, but Shannon's the real pro. So we're here today because in a previous episode, Solo Thoughts 5, I talked about this model of well-being that I've been developing. And it has these two elements to it. It has the foundation, right? What are the basics of life that you need to get in order to live a remarkable life? And those things are like, how do you get your health in order? How do you get your wealth in order? And how do you assemble a team, right? How do you assemble the people around you, both personal and professional, to support you? And the way Scott Barry Kaufman thinks about this idea is he thinks of it as like the hull of a boat, right? You need a sturdy hull to be able to handle the choppy waters of life. The other side, once you got the foundation, is the flourishing side. What is it that just sets you alight? What is it that really moves you into that world of remarkable? And there are a variety of ways that you can do this, and there is no set one way, one path for everyone. And so these are things like engagement, creativity, and then this notion of achievement or meaning, living a life in which you yourself are doing something great or you're doing something great for others. And then this last little bit of it, which some people find puzzling, but this notion of the pursuit of positive emotion. And Scott would call this like the sail, the thing that catches wind and you can really and we've all had that feeling of when it's just that feeling of you're just out on the open water, things are kind of going your way. And so what I want to talk about a little bit is this idea of positive emotion. How is it that we can create more positive emotion in our life? And one of those ways, I think, is through developing our own personal sense of taste and getting more positive emotion in the way that we interact with the world, see the world, consume, and so on. And so that's the setup for this. And so we're looking at that one element. And again, it's neither necessary nor sufficient. There are people who live lives that don't have much positive emotion, and yet their sale is still catching wind.
I like to call
That's
that
right.
failing up.
Well, I would just say, there are people who are working so hard to develop a vaccine, to win a gold medal, to build something great, that they don't have that much positive emotion in their life, but they wouldn't trade what they're doing for more positivity.
Because they're fulfilling a purpose that's higher than them or something. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's some amount that you need to have, I think.
So
You have to refuel.
you're not distinguishing like Eeyore energy versus you're doing something that has a lot of stress and a lot of stakes. So you might not be a joyful person, but you're in some sort of flow.
But you're living your best life.
Yeah.
That's right.
Great.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. Look, if Eeyore did something besides complain, he might be living a remarkable life.
You know what
Focus,
the problem
yeah.
is?
Shift the
Eeyore
focus.
was invented before podcasts were around.
He would have listened to all of our wisdom, right? He would have, yeah.
He would have finally felt heard. He'd be on Mark Maron as like the sidekick.
So before we get into that, Shannon, I want to hear your story. How is it that we've come to talk to you about this? What got you going with the Simply Luxurious Life?
Well, the fact that you were talking about purpose and fulfilling life or a best life, in all honesty, in 2009, the recession had just happened. Mm-hmm. I was a teacher for 20 years. I retired from teaching this year. I was teaching in high school for 20 years.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah.
Indeed, yeah.
And and you're in academics too, so you can appreciate this. That was a giving to society. That was something that I felt needed my full attention, but something was missing in 2009. Something was still missing. And I was at that point, I was in a small town, not a super small town, but I just started to explore. I was like, okay, I cannot be the only one who has this, aficionado for, French lifestyle or for cooking or for all these different things. But in that particular town, I was kind of poo-pooed and kind of seen as an outlier. And I was like, come on, Shannon.
You're not telling us the town because you don't want to shit on this town.
No. I do love this town. This town treated me very well. But, it's a small town mentality. And it was this idea of being different. And I wasn't trying to be different. I was just being Shannon. So I started following my curiosity and I started blogging for only personal, expression. And I didn't really connect with a lot of people necessarily out of the gate. So that wasn't the pursuit. And it just started to snowball as I started to sincerely share my curiosities, my passions, my oopses, my lessons that I've learned.
What might one of those early posts look like?
Honestly, the very first post was just about my day. And what I loved about the day after the holidays, I was on my own. It was the 26th of December, and I went to different shops, and I was listening to certain music that people probably wouldn't like in that particular time in my life, and I just embraced it. I just shared my everyday experience, and I just said, this is it. This is me, and I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to feel bad. This is just, and it wasn't even weird looking back, but at the time, it was setting myself free. And it just... in a way, maybe it was because I was a teacher, maybe because I was a woman, maybe whatever it was, different people started to resonate with that. And it's been steady and very organic. And it's been just me for now, it'll be 11 and a half years now doing what I do. The podcast came around organically with the launch of my first book. I was like, oh, podcasting, what's this? Let's explore it. And I've never been afraid to try things. Okay. And so I think blogging is an interesting, medium in itself. It's constantly evolving. But I kind of got in I got in the second wave.
Yes.
I say David Leibovitz was the first wave in 1999 with his food blog. And I bowed down. And in 2009 was the second wave. We all sincerely started blogging to just connect. It wasn't a money pursuit. I didn't expect it to be.
You weren't a content creator back then.
I wasn't an influencer then. Yes. So it came from a place of sincerity, and I hold on to that. And then I just let it be what it's going to be. And I just celebrate and am grateful for it. Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. The Solo's been growing organically. I didn't know it's going to take 12 years. So I should readjust my expectations.
I think the speed is picking up. I really do. I think it's a lot more quick now.
You're also talking about
right.
like the wave of internet becoming such a part of our lives. We didn't have, in 99, we didn't have pocket computers the way that we do now, right? In 2009, even it wasn't to the degree. So
smartphones. I mean, the Instagram was 2012.
Oh, really?
So we talk about, or maybe 11, but I got on it 2012 just after it began. So it was, and Twitter 2010. So yeah.
That's great. So I want to ask, you said French lifestyle.
Yeah.
And this is something you write about in your book. I'm sure you talk about it and write about it elsewhere.
Yeah.
What do you mean by the French lifestyle? You know, for the person who's never been to France, who's never spent an afternoon in Paris.
Yeah. Well, and I started with that notion. I've been to France now 5 or 6 times, but I studied abroad there. And what I instantly knew or noticed that made me uncomfortable when I was 20 was the slower pace of life. And that was in 2000, right? And it wasn't as though it was that odd. It was just, wow, we slow down and eat 3-hour meals. What's that? We actually turn everything off. It made me really uncomfortable when I was 20. But then as I started to grow and just explore that culture more, I started to realize they have something going on here. Let's keep exploring this. And that's where the quality over quantity kind of resonated with me. And that's the concept of my blog, is a focus on quality over quantity in every single arena. It's not about more, it's about better. It's about depth. It's about sincere curiosity, and not doing it because you should or to be contrary. Just you're diving deep and you're investing. For me, that's what the French reveal in their food, especially. I'm a big, I love getting in my kitchen. That's therapy for me, and exploring how I'm not an artist in any other concept of writing or creating art. I just get in that kitchen and have some fun. And that's opened up a lot of doors for me too. But, there's a lot of different French ways of life. But for me, just the quality over quantity, and an appreciation for the everyday moments. I think there's a better, I don't like to compare, but there's this perspective that I think Americans miss when we have so much to take for granted here, and sometimes we just don't. We just kind of skip ahead to the pursuing and not the present.
Lily, have you been to France?
I have. I actually, that's the only other language other than technically Latin, but no one speaks Latin.
Nerd.
And I cheated. It's the only class I ever cheated in was Latin. But 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, and 10th grade. It is what it is. You know what I mean?
You did 4 years, my goodness.
Yeah, I satisfied my language credit. And then I took French. But as a child, I grew up traveling quite a bit in Europe. And so I picked up the language and then did a study abroad dance program in France. And we went to, we were in Paris and then Montpellier and all the things,
I think it's hard to talk about taste without talking about money. I love this saying about it's not about more, it's about better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this connects even the title of your blog and your book, Simply Luxurious Life. I want to ask you about the use of that word luxurious.
It's funny that you asked that. I just posted something today about that exact.
Oh, really? Nice.
Why? Yeah. Only because different people ask who don't know the concept of the blog. So I like to return to it from time to time. But luxury is, by definition, it's something that brings you ease and comfort. And it's also something that you're not expected to experience every day all the time. So it's unique or elevated in that way. Thus, it's not a necessity, it's a luxury. With that said, I've taken this idea of true luxury to mean something that brings you comfort, and thus that requires you to know yourself well. And that is not something you come out of the womb knowing. It's not something you know when you graduate from high school necessarily, maybe some more than others. Everyone's going to find that understanding of who they are. That is constantly changing, but at least they'll understand fundamentally who they are at different times, and it will take time. So then you take that knowledge of who you are. Well, what brings me comfort? What brings me ease? As you just said, you're at level 1 for organizing. Someone else may absolutely need to be at level 2 or level 3 to be comfortable or at ease, but you know that about yourself. And so then you take that knowledge and you create conceptually a life that brings you ease and comfort throughout your days. And so bringing it back to the sanctuary, for me right now, I am in the middle of, I can't travel during the pandemic, so I threw my focus and attention to my house. And I basically have been trying to use the past 5 years when I was renting, the previous years when I had owned another home. Okay, what worked, what didn't, what I love, and then brought my travels into it. What vacation rentals, what were the things that made me feel really comfortable 1,000 miles away from home? And I really tried to mine all that. And that might seem, okay, this chair, I know it's not beautiful. I'm getting it reupholstered, but let me just talk you through this chair. I know I need a comfortable chair because I'm going to sit in my desk a lot because I work in my office. I love this wallpaper. It's going to match in its own unique way. I promise it will, but it will work for it brings me peace when I walk in this room. Someone else is going to say, that is weird and odd, walk away. But I know that about myself. So luxury is something that brings you comfort when you see it or experience it or feel it, and it calms you down and makes you feel at peace. I'd like to say it's not something you regularly experience, but yet when you reach that level where you figured it out, you can experience it every day. It's just that you haven't for a long time. And to your point at the very beginning of our conversation, a lot of people don't take the time to figure out what that really is for them. And so thus it is rare, and thus it is luxurious to an outsider watching your life. If that makes sense.
My accessibility entry point into this kind of a conversation, I have a lot of friends of varying ages. And when I speak with my younger friends and they don't care about coffee, for instance, they're like, whatever, I just drink the coffee at work. And you're like, oh, dear God.
Lily's like, gross.
Exactly,
Gross.
right? But at some point, it's like you level up, you expand your palate. There are certain things that are awful. Cough medicine tasted awful when I was younger. Now that I enjoy bourbon, I'm like, oh, cough syrup, whatever. You know what I mean?
No problem.
So it's interesting, like, that's the most accessible entry point into where are you at when all of a sudden you're like, I will make a ceremony where I'm pouring hot water over my delicious beans that I had shipped right within 24 hours when they were roasted, you know?
Yeah.
It's different.
Before we continue, I want to tell you about our sponsor, Wax Crescent, a Boulder-based company that makes small batch candles, hand-poured. Founded by Kim Terabeel, a solo entrepreneur and contributor to the podcast, her candles are made with soy wax and infused with wonderful fragrances and essential oils. The candles are fabulously designed, and I use one nearly every day. Use code SOLO20 for 20% off your first order at waxcrescent.com. That's SOLO20 at waxcrescent, like crescent the moon.com. And gentlemen, don't worry. Kim has guy-friendly candles too, or as I like to call them, mandals. My favorites are Imagine and Birch. Thank you, Wax Crescent, and thank you, Kim, for sponsoring the podcast. Oh my goodness. So there's so much to this. I want to step back, unpack what Shannon said, and then I want to jump into the coffee. But Lily, she's hit on something that Shannon writes a lot about.
Food.
Which is about establishing rituals.
And food.
Yes, and food. Okay, so I want to get into what you were just saying, Shannon. So this is something that you can develop. You're not born with good taste.
No.
Which I agree with, trust me. I like the fact that it takes time, right? So there's some investment, some experience that goes into it. I like the fact that it may start out as sort of infrequent, special, rare, but you can then turn it into something that is experienced sort of more commonly that's there. And I do like coffee as a case study that's there, because I think that there is a class of experiences that are sort of foreign and maybe even aversive at the beginning that you can then, with sort of repeated exposure and then oftentimes some education, some feedback that you can develop. I've had the same thing with espresso drinks and ritualizing that. And I've actually been kind of puzzling over this, and I'm going to actually put it to the both of you to help me solve this problem. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
All right.
I love a puzzle.
So anybody who's listened to this podcast regularly knows how I like to start my day. In a cafe with a cappuccino doing creative work, my 3 C's, as I call it. However, I've had a point of tension because I am starting to do a bit more fasting. And so the problem, of course, is like a cappuccino has some milk in it, and it could technically break the fast in a way that an Americano and for folks, again, this is about developing taste. So if you don't know what a cappuccino is, it is 2 ounces of espresso, 2 ounces of steamed milk, and 2 ounces of foam in its most pure sense. And it can be done very well and it can be done very poorly. An Americano is 2 ounces of espresso with hot water added to it. So it's more like, it feels a little bit more like a traditional cup of coffee. So there's no calories or anything there. So I have this tension in my life where I enjoy my delicious cappuccino. It's a part of a ritual in which I start my day. And now I've been foregoing it in exchange for an Americano because I don't want to break the fast. But I'm like, I find myself in this tug of war between my old ritual and habits and deliciousness and this new one, which is to be embracing like a little bit of a healthier lifestyle. And so
have you tried tea? I have to ask, as a tea person, have you explored the world of not American tea necessarily? I'm sure there's some great American teas, but the British and the French know how to make great teas.
Mariage Frere. Mariage Frere.
Yes, I just had their Provence. Absolutely.
The vanille bourbon, or what? Oh God, heavenly! And the candle, Peter, the candle. They boil water to the correct temperature.
I think he wants his caffeine from coffee beans.
Yeah, I like how you're like, you have the wrong dilemma. You're just thinking, you're not thinking about this right. So I'll tell you my answer to this. I'll get your reaction to it. So what I have decided to do, and it's sort of in this way, is making the cappuccino special again.
Yeah.
Right? Making it rare and special again. So I'm leaning into the Americano unless I'm happening to start my day when the fast is already over and then I get to have the cappuccino. So now it becomes a treat rather than this thing that I have to do because it's part of my 3 C's. That's there. But it is funny, like even that's something that simple, because I care about the stuff, creates, I mean, this is not the biggest puzzle I'm trying to solve right now. but
you
these
hit on
things
something.
matter. Aesthetics matter.
Well, in preparation for today, I was reflecting back on different posts I've written about Twyla Tharp. Pick up her book, The Creative Habit. She loves rituals, and she thinks they're a vital part of creative individuals. It frees your brain. It opens it up. But she kind of speaks to both, I think, what you talked about, the cappuccino and the Americano. But just, you're not thinking about it. You do it instinctively. When you're engrossed in it, your brain just starts to open up. And the ideas just flood in, not necessarily what you expect or what you're looking for, but it's the ritual. And she calls it rituals, not habits. She coins the term rituals.
Yes.
That you love to do or enjoy or find pleasure in that create that. And this is a daily ritual she speaks of. But the creative habit, Twyla Tharp.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Lily, what's your reaction to this dilemma?
Change
besides
the cap.
Drink tea.
Make C stand for coffee. Get over it, Peter. Actually, you know what? I will say that similar to Shannon's croissant on Sundays, I'd be curious what would happen if when you're talking about fasting, especially intermittent fasting, you're not technically supposed to do it every single day. So I'd be curious if you just varied what the ritual was so that it was Wednesdays and you know what I mean? Like you create the special.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun.
Weekly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
I know I'm overthinking this.
But I love that. I love that about you, though, Peter, because you do end up. What you end up doing is creating something special out of what would be just start your day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Look, I am shot out of a cannon in the morning. It's my best part of the day. I do my best work. My energy level's the best. Why waste it on something that's not? We should be happy about the start of a day.
Yeah. There's nothing that's interfering with your ideas or your thoughts yet. You have more control. I love my mornings too. They're priceless. Yeah.
All right. So what would you add, Shannon, to this idea of to develop taste is, this repeated experience, right? So the first time you taste coffee or whiskey or cough syrup in Lily's case, it's gross, right? But the 1,000th time you can recognize the nuance and enjoy and actually that same cup of coffee that you had the first time might actually be really bad the 1,000th time for a different reason because it's no longer sort of good enough.
More. Yeah.
And so how is it that this sort of repeated experience plus knowledge, is there something missing in terms of
Well, I think you kind of mentioned it a little bit. Seek out people who know more than you about it. I think that's key. I love the history of words. And so I was looking up what is the history of taste. And it's the old French is to try and to touch. And so it's this idea of just trying, and it's just a taste. It's just a small little, nibble or moment. But I mean, you think about anything that you all have spoken about already, but I think about, taste in decor or taste in clothing. For me, I used to go with neutrals all the time in my home. I was going to play it safe. I was going to make sure I could sell this house, whatever it was. This is years ago. Now I'm like falling in love with the British cottage arts and crafts because my house is a craftsman. I'm going to be true to that. And so I'm like, how do they put patterns together? Two different patterns, but they look like they're supposed to. How does that work? So you go to interior
mixing
designer.
plaids. What?
Yeah. How can you do that? But you go to the people who know more than you. I would take I took an online course from Rita Koenig, but then I also have a friend here who's from Belgium, and she knows her European decor. And so she's the one guiding me through things. And in fact, with this, just to go back really quickly, I know people can't see this because this is not going to be shown. I showed her the wallpaper. I said, I have 2 chairs need to be reupholstered. You have fun. Bring me a bunch of fabrics and I want to see what you would do because I don't have a clue. And then I start to see a little bit every single time she does something like that of how it works. I'm not going to become an expert like she is, but the more I do it, I hone that expertise. So try again.
Shannon, I'm going to ask you to take a picture of the space that you're in and send it to me, and we'll put it in the exhibit so people can see what you're.
Why
what
I
you're
keep referring to it.
I would like to add too that what you, I think, are referring to as pattern clashing, which is dope, and I love doing it with my own wardrobe as well as my house, deliberately, of course. Your chair and wallpaper, at least from where I'm sitting, look awesome together.
This will be recovered, I promise. But it was the style of the chair. I love the style
Question,
of the chair,
do Peter and I get to weigh in on this chair change?
I think the decision's been made, but if it hadn't been, I would absolutely.
I do. So I want to get back to this idea of your home and this move, Shannon. So you moved from a town that didn't lend itself as much to your sort of French lifestyle. You're now in Bend, Oregon.
Which is still not real French, but I think I'm the only Francophile here, but still.
But there's a little bit more culturally and a little more access. I assume if you want to cook, you can get fresh fruits, and there's
markets.
Farmers markets and restaurants and so on that might be a lot more
cultural diverse for Oregon.
Yes.
Nice. So we still are limited, but
I love this idea of making a home for you and not for the person who may someday buy your home.
Yeah.
I've only bought one home in my life, and I've renovated it. And anybody who's ever renovated it knows both the pain and the joy. The joy happening a year after the renovation has ended. And this was an ongoing conversation with my design build guy. So I had a really wonderful guy's name's Ken Storm. If any of you ever want a house built or renovated in the Boulder, Colorado area. And Ken and I talked deeply about this issue. And one of the things was I really leaned into making a house that was going to be right for me. And
you customized it.
That's right. Yeah. But the way we did it, because Ken has better taste than me, and if we just left it up to my own preferences, the house would have been a little too boring because I would have played it a little safe. And so any kind of decision that was made, I asked him to give me 3 options, and only 3 options, and to tell me the one he thinks I should do.
Okay. Before or after you made your decision? I mean, out of curiosity, did you have him give you his preference before you narrowed it down to the one of the 3?
Before. I wanted to know what he preferred before because I trusted his... he's a professional.
I just didn't know if you wanted him to influence your decision. I mean, your opinion. Yeah,
I did. Curious. I wanted him to do that. So the first thing we decided was I'm going to make the house for me. The second one, I was going to limit my options and I was going to lean on his expertise. And then the third one was I limited what he could give me, which was, and I was doing this renovation in 2009. I said, don't give me any options that if someone saw it, they would say, oh, you renovated in 2009.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Right. So I didn't want to do what everyone else happened to be doing at that time. And that allowed me to sort of create a space that really was one of a kind and reflected my taste plus some expertise.
Absolutely. No, that's a good idea. I like the narrowing down to limiting the choices. That can be overwhelming.
It was.
I will say also, it kind of in line with that. So I come from a line of interior designers. My mother, my grandmother, and great-grandfather. And so as my adulting has continued, I inherited different pieces of furniture, and it was an interesting jumping off point in the same way that if you grow up in a household with doctors or teachers, you're a part of the conversation. That's language that has been a part of your, auditory growth. And so I was able to use that as a launching off point and then plug in a couple things and get rid of things that turns out were not in alignment with me. And so, yes, I will buy an IKEA piece of furniture because I can easily spray paint that brass, and now it fits into what I have. And someone came into my house and was like, "Oh shit, you are not from Minnesota." I was like, "That's right, but why also do you know that?" He goes, "Because I have no idea where you got any of your stuff."
That's right. And versus everybody who gets their stuff at Crate and Barrel and at Pier 1 and at maybe they get crazy and go big and go to West Elm.
Right? Yeah.
Do you have a design within reach in Minneapolis? I'm sure you do.
I haven't looked.
Yes. As I call it, design out of reach for the average person.
Yeah, fair. But here's my question. I have a practical question. As a grown-up who appreciates quality over quantity, I do also have things. Some people might call it stuff, but I moved 2,000 miles 51 weeks ago, and I got rid of a lot of the things that were stuff. And now I'm moving again. Not enough time in between those big moves. Not enough time. However, I still have things. And I'm in that space now where I'm like, well, what is it that I want to take with me into this next chapter? And, I love this idea of essentialism and what are the things that like cultivate a feeling of just quality, good yumminess in your own environment, And then also where the fuck do we put the paper clips?
So, Shannon, I'm going to give you the choice. Do you want to answer this question now, or do you think it's something that we should return to?
Attempt it. We can attempt it because I just moved into my house a couple years ago too, and I decluttered like crazy. I thought I decluttered to similar to you, Lily, when I moved the time that I moved to Bend in 2015. I thought I decluttered. And then I moved to this house. My parents said, "We thought you were a simple life." And I'm like, "Oh, be quiet." I think there's this decision you make where you say, "Am I going to use this now?" If you don't know, just put it in a box and reassess it later. I think sometimes things hold memories that we're not ready to let go of. I have a bed that I got rid of out of my primary bedroom, and I still keep it in my garage, but I need to get rid of it. But emotionally, I'm not ready yet. And so I think emotionally, you have to be ready for certain things. The little things, paper clips, I don't know, stick them in that utility drawer by the door. I don't know, but
there's going to be a video component.
To honor that.
Is there a video component to this episode where we like walk through Shannon's house? That's gorgeous, but then we visit her like skeletons in a closet of her storage unit.
That's the only big one. It's yeah. It's one of those things, but it had to get out of the primary bedroom, so it just had to get out of it.
Yeah,
so.
I do think that this. I mean, I'm fascinated with this topic. It's so interesting because as part of this model, I talk about reinventing yourself. And so the overall narrative is, as a solo, once you start to realize that you have options, you have a lot more freedom, right? Your lives aren't necessarily being edited by someone else, And so you get to create not only your lifestyle, but also the space that you're in. And this is something that Shannon, you're really focused on, is creating what you call sanctuary. Yeah. And so I think that this question is related to the sanctuary question. And I talk about one of the best ways to begin a reinvention process is to, quote unquote, tidy up.
Yeah.
And I say, how do you tidy up your space, your head, and even your wardrobe as a way to because those are easy fixes. Yeah. A lot of the other stuff is hard, but those are easy relative, right? Mm-hmm. So I think there's sort of two ways to your question, Lily, that I think about this. There's the sort of space that you see and interact with all the time. And, I think people, the sort of degree to which they live a tidy or messy life depends, completely on their comfort and their style. I tend to say go tidier than not, in part because it's also creates a more welcoming space for others too. But that's just a personal bias. But what do you do when you're tidying up that space with all that stuff, right? Yeah. And so, Shannon, I know that feeling of putting something kind of in purgatory.
Yeah, limbo, yeah.
And the idea is you sort of might need to give it that time to like have some time away from it to sever that emotional connection. And then also, if it's been in that space for long enough and you're just like, I haven't thought about or needed this thing in a year, it is time to go.
It's time. It's time to go. Yeah, I agree.
But sometimes that space, this is that next level of tidiness, which is like, and I'm not there yet. Like, if you look in all of my drawers and boxes and stuff, not everything is like perfectly laid out.
Oh, thank God.
You know what I mean? It's not. There's like...
Do you put your socks together like the KonMari method, or do you just wrap them into each other? Do you roll them up?
I just wrap them into each other and they're just thrown in the drawer. Yeah. There's a big pile of socks in the drawer. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. So I'm like first level tidy, second level not so much.
Copy.
You know. But let's get to it's outstanding because I think that this resonates. So let's do this. I'm going to ask some hard-hitting questions in a moment. But before we get to that, this idea of sort of knowledge and experience, let's give some people some more kind of examples of that if they could, just in order to sort of set them sailing if they want to try to lean into this. I'll start with mine and give you time to think. When I was a postdoc, I knew that I was going to be going on the job market. And what you do as an academic on a job market is you visit a campus for the day and you have a series of meetings and you give a talk, and then the faculty, some subset of the faculty, take you out to dinner. And that dinner is twofold. The dinner's a way to sort of show off the town, look how great it is here, kind of thing. And then the next thing is like, they're further sussing you out to figure out like, hey, are you a decent human being, in this way. One of the things that I find with these business school types is they get very fancy about their wines. They care a lot about their wines. And I was 33, 34. I'm just, I had very little experience with that kind of stuff. It was beyond me. I wasn't a big drinker. I didn't grow up in a home where I think my mom's wine intake was just to cope with being a single mom. It wasn't for the enjoyment of wine. And so I took a wine tasting course. I mean, it was really involved, a wine tasting course. It was like a 5-week course kind of thing, 5 nights or whatever. And it was a lesson and then tasting. Key, you never do the tasting before the lesson because everybody's falling asleep. And they started you out like with very sweet white wines, and by the end you're doing like Cabernet Sauvignon, like very bold reds and so on. And so it was a crash course in that. And then at the end of that, I had enough knowledge to not seem like a fool and enough of an appreciation that I wasn't going to order a Riesling with dinner because it was the only one I could stand drinking, in that sense. And so that's my kind of like crash course in developing taste. I'm wondering if either of you have another one. It could be food. It could be in some other domain.
Just since you just talked about wine, I mean, what pops into my head, I used to live close to Walla Walla, and they have I would say, Napa Valley is close by too, but it's more expensive to go just taste. And so we would go a couple times a year, but every time I would go to Walla Walla, because it was a couple 45 minutes away from where I lived, before I would buy my wine, you could taste the wines in these wine rooms and you wouldn't have to pay anything. So I would just get into the habit for 9 years. Whenever I would go get wine, I'd have the vintner or whoever was working walk me through what I was tasting. And then, I just also kept my brain, if you don't like it, don't buy it, but at least understand what's there and what you're tasting. And so I think it just takes time, and a crash course that would have been intriguing. I think that would have been a lot of fun. That's neat. You got to go to that. But I started to appreciate this little nuances, and I started to see there sometimes price makes a difference, but it doesn't always make a difference. And that was the other thing too, is strengthening my confidence to say, I don't need to go out and buy that $75 bottle of wine for this fancy dinner, because I know this bottle of wine from this small vintner who's just getting started is going to knock their socks off, and it's only $20.
Yeah, it's great.
So, you start to trust your palate. And I think that's also what you gain when you keep trying things, is you start to trust yourself. Yes, the expert might know something, but you also have to honor what you are drawn to. So
that's great.
Yeah.
I will say that I was partnered with someone for 10 years who fancied himself with quite elevated taste. And that was a fun ride to be on. But, for that regard, I ate and drank very well. I love it. I value food and wine and all the things, flavor and all that. Same thing with our house. But he was really controlling about the aesthetic, and I never got to be my own self and experiment and figure out, that's too much or not enough, And so since being solo, it's been really nice to pull back on some of the nuances, so that, yes, at one point I could identify all the shades of gray between white and black in the spectrum. But the reality is I only need a couple of them. It's like, it's too much. It's decision fatigue. Yes. And I like to say that I love the taste of quality champagne, but I can totally be a beer girl. Mm-hmm. So it's that interesting nuance between what are the things that are fun to make it special, what are the day-to-day rituals to make this enticing, and then also recognize, like, where's your floor? I think it's like that floor that you're not willing to go under anymore.
There you go. Yeah.
That's fabulous. And you're foreshadowing my burrito story, Lily.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard that.
So I'll give another quick one because my mind's racing listening to the two of you talk about this. Here's mine. So I have no training in film. I've watched thousands of films in my life. And as a result of that experience, I've developed sort of more discerning taste about what makes a movie good or not good. Mm-hmm. But what took me to the next level was DVDs and how they used to add a director's usually a director's commentary. So you could rewatch the movie with the director's commentary. It's one of this. I don't know why Netflix doesn't do it.
Agreed.
It's a missed opportunity.
Agreed.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's a completely missed opportunity. So listeners, tweet at Netflix. Tell them to do this for my sake.
That's because they're just into consumption and consumer end. They're not actually into the craft. Anyways, continue.
So I would watch these movies, which I liked, and then I came to love the movie because I started to understand the complexity, the nuance, why decisions were made, and how it was done. And so I was basically being taught by the master that was there. And so, of course, that ended up having this simultaneous thing where something that was sort of complex and difficult became easier to understand and more enjoyable. But then at times, I started to realize how a bunch of other movies were kind of trash.
I love that you brought in film. I taught rhetoric for 11 years.
Okay.
And you bring in strong writing, and then you show the kids all the tools of rhetoric that went into creating this fascinating and moving. Why is it moving? Why is it engaging? What's persuasive about it? And at the end of the year, those students walk out and go, oh my gosh, the guts, the what's behind the scenes, that's what makes it. It appears simple on the screen or the page or the whatever it is, piece of art. But there's so many nuances that go in behind to make it work the way it is, like the director walking you through it, walking them through those rhetorical tools, Aristotle's triangle. And it seems complex because it is, but once you understand it, when you listen to it, it's simple and you take it in and it moves you and it gets you to consider things that you wouldn't have considered because of everything that was put, all the little ingredients that and someone who wouldn't know how to write rhetoric or organize it they'd forget the salt. They'd forget, if we're talking about a recipe comparison, they forget the spices and the simple flavorings that elevate that dish, elevate that speech. But it takes someone who knows that to walk you through so your taste can be refined.
One of the things that you find, so there is a little bit of research on aesthetics. Actually, there's a lot of research on aesthetics, but the best research finds that there are, I hesitate to use the word universal, but there is something about human perception that cuts across culture and class, and that is that fluency, the ease of processing, tends to make something more enjoyable, more pleasant, more beautiful, and so on. So there's ways that you can create fluency, right? So one way is in the image, the words, the sentence, the visual itself, right? So great artists are able to do this. Mm-hmm. The other way is to make something more fluent by increasing the understanding of it. So what ends up happening is you can take a very complex thing that's disfluent and you can make it fluent by understanding the complexities. Right. And I think, Shannon, that's what you're describing here. And then in your case with the spices, you could take something that is too simple. Yeah. You can make it more complex and thus make it more enjoyable because it hits that sort of sweet spot where you are.
Like adding a touch of lavender to vanilla ice cream.
Wow, wonderful call.
Bringing it back.
Yes, by the way, my mint chip ice cream is like, all of my friends love it. It's with real mint, organic mint, all organic, like the organic milk, the delicious milk, full fat. You only need a little scoop because that's all you need.
Yeah.
Satiates. Oh, that sounds good.
That's more. It's not about more. It's about better, right, Shannon?
There you go.
All right, let's talk about let's ask the hard questions here, though, and because
what pants are you wearing, and prove it. Stand up right now.
Who says I'm wearing pants? So here I want to point out a potential downside to what you're describing, Shannon, and that is this sounds expensive. Right? This sounds expensive, right? And because, yes, Pete, I understand there is some genetic, biological, psychological thing that discerns things that are good from less good, right? Things that are that is good taste from bad taste. But really, this is just a status game we're all playing. It's just our way to show I'm better than you. I'm not part of... I'm better than my past self, that poor boy who grew up in South Jersey. Look how far I've come. Look how much better I am than the other men on the dating apps because I've got all this great taste. Look how much better I am than the other business school professors at the dinner table because I know about these wines. And why am I wrong to say that this is a status game?
Because that's not true luxury. It's about them, not you. It's about them, not you. I'm glad you brought this up, and I love that Lily said that she doesn't need a lot of her mint ice cream, chocolate mint ice cream, that it satiates. That's the whole thing with quality. You don't need more, you need better because it lasts longer. I like to look at it this way. It's an investment that pays you back in the long run. If you are going to, as you said, you customized your home in 2009 so that it wouldn't look like 2009, that way you won't have to renovate it in 2019, 2029. Think of the money you just saved 2 different times of having to renovate. You actually, I don't want to say save money, but you're not spending money on something that you're going to have, you think you have to do to keep up. Yeah. And so I use it with clothing, cost per wear. Yeah, this pair of jeans could be $200. If you wear those pants 20 times, they're math, $10? Right. But you get the point. You're not going back to the shop every couple months because the pants wore out or because you don't look good so you don't wear them anyway. So it just sits in your closet and you've actually So the idea with whether it's decor, whether it's investing, and again, I also know that you can't just spend $200 for a pair of jeans out of the gate if you have a job that's just getting you by. So sometimes you have to do to get to where you want to go. So I look at that with my teaching and my blogging. My teaching was my career. Okay. I loved it. I invested in it. I did my 110 best, 10% every single day. But I also knew it wasn't my calling after a while. I started to consciously realize it wasn't my calling. My calling is trying to teach people about what true contentment is. What simply luxurious living is about cultivating contentment, which is something within you, not without outside of you. So with that said, I couldn't just leave teaching because my blogging wasn't making enough money. Doesn't mean I didn't love teaching. But at the same time, I need to be honest with myself. And so you can do things, you work your tail off to get to where you need to go so you can have that ability to invest, whether it's monetarily or with your time or your attention. So there's some things that you may not want to be doing, but if you know that you shouldn't be doing them the rest of your life because that will affect your well-being, because it will if you did, then you're more consciously aware of your journey. I kind of meandered into a lot of different directions there. But the idea is, yes, on the surface, it looks expensive in the moment to the outsider.
And before I get Lily's reaction, so you're saying, though, what constitutes good taste is not in the eye of others, it's in your own eye.
It has to be. Otherwise, it's not genuine or sincere. And thus, it's not necessarily going to bring you comfort or ease because you're waiting for the approval, the applause of others. And that's not guaranteed. And that's not a way to live for contentment. It might be for happiness because eventually you get the applause because hap means luck. Hap means luck. And that's outside of yourself. I love breaking down words. But it's this idea that... The
Latin girl here appreciates that.
I was going to say we got someone who had Latin. I love it.
Finally, this thing is paying off.
But it really comes down to, the cherry on the top is people saying, good for you, awesome. But you have to say good for you, awesome. And you have to feel at peace with yourself. And that's the well-being component. And that's what takes work. That's what takes work.
So there's two things I want to speak to, which is, first, it's like the focusing on the ocean of where you want to be versus the waves that are the current obstacle / possible excuse. An example would be anybody who's ever leveled up in anything in their lives, where you just have to buckle down. I'm going to work on being fit, and it's really uncomfortable right now, but I'm going to commit to this, right? And then in 6 weeks, you're like, oh, that was a little bit easier than it was 6 weeks ago. I'm going to live, I'm going to get a different car, or I'm going to be more frugal with my budget, or whatever it might be. It might be uncomfortable for that initial adjustment period, but in the long run, is it paying off for the quality of life that you want? And I remember having this conversation with a friend of mine who was struggling with his weight consistently, and it was years long. And he was a very large man, and he would come in with his AM PM hot dogs. And I was like, I'm just going to reflect back what the behavior I've been seeing. There's no judgment, but it's interesting to me that in the one hand you're talking about this issue, and on the other hand you have an AM PM hot dog. And he said, well, they're only $1.99 for two. And I said, what's really interesting though is that how much money are you spending a week at AM PM? And I broke it down and was like, do you know that you could make a grass-fed beef bolognese that would last you the entire week for the exact same amount of money? And you would have so much nourishment, you would be full, your bones would be getting everything they need. And he was like, that just sounds like too much effort. Exactly. Right?
We're making faces.
Yeah. So
Jen and I are making faces.
So what's your buy-in, and what's the excuse that that's your growth edge? And the other thing I want to talk about is this idea, like there's absolutely a money component that's just a practical thing, and you're the boss of what those decisions are, and you know what your full scope is, but sometimes people forget to like put all of the ingredients on the counter of what you're dealing with, and in the back of the cabinet there's a cream of mushroom that you could use. But when you say status, I go to trendy. Status is keeping up with the trends and buying fast fashion that is ruining our environment, buying the big box store furniture option because the leaning shelf is the new hit, but it's not real wood and it actually has toxic paint on it, and you're going to leave it on the side of the road when you move into your next apartment. So how are you paying for this, and how are you affecting everyone else? And wouldn't you rather have a really nice t-shirt that doesn't bleach improperly or fade or whatever, as opposed to the 3 graphic tees that you just got from Target that are going to end up in a landfill somewhere?
Yeah.
That's to me where I go, status is keeping up with trends, as opposed to making genuine choices that are connected to your personal experience, that are authentic to you, so that we get to see who you are as the embodiment in your fabric choice in that chair you're going to have.
Yeah, exactly. Lily.
I'm yes-anding you, Shannon.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. No.
Which
status
brings me
is
to
outside
my
of
burritos.
ourselves. Yeah. Oh, burritos. Back to burritos.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Brings me to my burritos. So I don't like status games, as you might imagine, right? I think that they don't serve the individual, because what they end up doing is they take you away from whatever your sort of authentic joy might be, or your best life, your remarkable life in that sense. Moreover, status games are often expensive. Yeah. They might be time consuming, and to be honest, they can be really quite unpleasant at times, but especially expensive. So a status game is a $75 wine when a $20 wine is more than plenty, right? In that sense. And so I have friends who like their fancy meals, and I like a good meal, but I've always sort of been a food is fuel person rather than food is pleasure person. And it allows me to remain more easily fit than the average food is pleasure person. And so sometimes what ends up happening is I have a meal and it was enjoyable, but it's really quite expensive. And I think I would have enjoyed a burrito just as much, and it would have cost me $9, And so there is that sense of like knowing myself enough where the poor Peter still sometimes goes, that wasn't worth the price tag, And so it can be painful to sort of keep up at times. Yeah. But good taste in a status way, I believe, is about having some things and not having others, right? This idea that if I want to look like I have good taste, I need to have the right jazz CDs. But I also have to get rid of my Britney CDs, right? So it's like, it's the thing, but I don't want to get rid of the Britney CDs. Like, I don't want to give up the pop music and the 80s music and all. I don't want to give up my guilty pleasures. You know what I mean? Even though I might still be able to lean into something that's more complex and difficult to consume, because I can now appreciate the goodness of this artistry that's there. So Shannon, I think you're really giving a powerful message when you say you're doing it for yourself.
It has to be, yeah. Well, and I think taste, just in that example that you shared there, it sounded to me as though taste was something that society approves of. And I think back to the idea of status, it just encompasses so much of your mental space. And therefore, if you're so consumed about keeping up with people and doing what they say is the right thing to do, what is in trend now, then you're wasting time. You're wasting time pursuing what is unique within you that the world needs for you to get out and share. To bring it back to being solo, I mean, in my 20s, I was consumed too much with trying to do what I was supposed to do, trying to be in a relationship, which never worked, because when you try something that isn't supposed to be your journey, it just, whoa, keep hitting a brick wall. And then you're like, I consumed so much mental energy doing that I wasn't figuring out what I would eventually be doing in my 30s, which was the blog and traveling and things about understanding who I was. And so I think when you're worried about status and you're worried about what other people think is in good taste, you're not honing what makes sense for you and figuring out those little unique combinations that eventually turn into something pretty beautiful, but it might not start out that great. Britney, hang on to the Britneys, that's okay. But maybe there's something within that song or her way of singing that's going to spark why you explore what it is that draws you to that music. There's something there. You honor it. I think that's the key thing, honor it. You may not understand it right away, but
I'll clarify. I'm actually not that big a Britney fan. I'd like a few things, but I like my Taylor Swift. I like my Rihanna. I like, what I mean? I like pop music, in part because it's so fluent. It's just meant to bring joy.
Yeah.
I credit Britney for the abs that I discovered because of working out to some of her music. So
there you go.
That's my connection to that beautiful woman.
Shannon, this idea of pursuing a relationship for status purposes is a huge idea that I've been writing about.
Got it.
The worst reason to enter into a relationship is so people think more positively about you. Is a terrible reason to enter into a relationship. And so I'll say that again. To enter into a relationship, to get people to approve of you is a terrible reason to enter into a relationship.
Yeah.
And I think people do that a lot in the same way that they pursue luxurious things and they play these status games, which often they are expensive. They may be financially expensive. And in the case of relationships, they may be emotionally expensive, for example. That's there. Let's talk about being solo for a few minutes, and then we're going to end on some of your pillars of a simply luxurious life.
All right.
So how does being single relate to all of the things that we've been talking about? Is there something special for our listeners to take away versus this podcast could have been on any platform and not just solo?
When I want to use this phrase that I came across. Lauren Dern said it when she was in her 50s, and she called being single being in the choosing seat. I love that phrase. And when we're single, you spoke about this in your previous episode, we give ourselves so many options to be free. And if we embrace them and really explore our curiosity, we learn so much about ourselves that can then be translated into our better or different career. Our calling is discovered, better or different relationships, connections, not just romantic, all different types of connections can be made. And there's a piece that you find that then you carry with you moving forward to everything you put your fingers in or have experience with. And the world needs more of that. I think, I mean, so I guess it's this freedom to be curious. And if you embrace it and you step forward with some courage, but also some vulnerability, let go of what all these dictates are that the society says you're supposed to do at this certain time or whatever. I like your term prescriptive. This prescriptive way of living is not setting anyone free and thus not making us truly at peace. Mm-hmm. It's causing a lot of pain. So that would be the powerful part of being solo is you get to choose so many different ways of living.
Yeah, one of the thing about this model that I talked about at the outset, right, is if you imagine it like Scott does as a boat, you're not on, it's not a train where everybody's headed in the same direction. When you're on a boat, you can sail in whatever direction you want to sail in. And so I think that's connected to what you're saying here, which is there's no direction that you need to be sailing. You get to choose. Yeah. Now, it may be easier or harder depending on which way the wind is blowing, but nonetheless, you still get to choose.
That was going to say, speaking to that wind, I think it reveals what you truly want. Do you really want what you say you want? And if so, you're going to push through that wind. You're going to figure out a way around it or through it or to wait until the winds die down, and you're going to hang in there. But if that wind throws you off course, it really wasn't your journey to take. It really wasn't what you wanted. Maybe it was what you thought what you wanted, but someone else had, kind of influenced you in a way you weren't aware of. So it reveals truths too, that wind does, if it throws you off course.
And who hasn't been in a relationship when you have a vision of your future self that you are leaning towards, but know that the person you're with
they don't want that.
Doesn't fit. Right. And they don't want that.
Yeah.
I want the pattern clashing of those things. And that's the thing that makes them so, that gives them agita, And you're like, but that's amazing. And they're like, I can't live in a house like that. Well, I can't live in a house with you then,
Yeah, no. Look, we're not having rows of pillows on my bed. It's just not going to happen. It's just...
Unless you can justify why Peter needs that many pillows. That doesn't make sense.
I'm open to education, but right now, yes. So, no, that's really good. So I want to repeat this back. You said about being single is being in a choosing seat. Is that what you said? I think that's such an interesting term.
Not that you can't choose when you're in a relationship. I guess we need to be careful there because you absolutely can if you're in a healthy relationship and should be able to. But I think people need to really embrace that opportunity. It's an embracing of it.
I agree. I think one of the sad things about solos is that too many of them are trying to live the prescribed life. And the world is built for families. Mm. And so the Monday through Friday, the 9 to 5, the house with the white picket fence, a lot of these things, a lot of the sort of default choices that people make with regard to their careers, their consumption, their lifestyle, and so on, is sort of more in line with a family orientation. And again, nothing wrong with it. I'm not anti-family, but you have optionality. So Shannon, when she said the last episode, it was the episode with Tim Kreider, who essentially gave up power in search of freedom. And what ends up happening is a lot of people accumulate power in part because they feel special. it's a status game. Also, power and money often go together. But the one thing is that Tim makes a persuasive argument is the more power that you have, the actual less freedom that you often have. The more obligations you have, the more you have to behave a certain way, and so on. And so I like this idea of just you get to decide, you get to customize your life and develop your taste, and you can do so because you're in the choosing seat. Yeah. Last thing, you have, you talk about these pillars of building a simply luxurious life. And I like the word building, right? It suggests that it's an ongoing process in the same way we talked about building a house or building a lifestyle there. We don't have time for all of them. I'd like to highlight a few and get your feedback on them. So number one, I assume this is not arbitrary. Number one, have a healthy self-respect and self-worth.
That takes some people a lifetime.
Some people may never get past number one. Let's be honest.
Talk about the waves to get into this ocean.
Yeah, it was intentional. You know, looking back on it, the sanctuary component, I think, enables us, and the social well-being too, and all that helps us get to having self-worth, or recognizing we all have it. We just have to recognize we have it, have self-worth and self-respect. But yeah, I'm actually exploring a book right now called Self-Compassion. And there's been a bunch of research done on self-compassion recently about how instead of focusing on self-esteem, we need to focus on self-compassion, because in that practice, it actually brings about self-esteem. And if we focus on self-esteem, it's actually not wasted energy, but it's backward.
Yes.
And so the self-compassion, I think, feeds into the self-respect. Honor where you are now. Honor where you are now. Honor the fact that you do have worth. Every single person does. And that you deserve to be in the choosing seat, to back to that term. You deserve to figure out what speaks to you. And just because and I think it's the other thing that's important. Stop comparing yourself to everybody and anything except for maybe who you were yesterday. But even then, I think sometimes we can be a little too critical on ourselves.
And you're also echoing what Twyla Tharp and other creatives have talked about, which is you will never be where you want to be unless you start with where you are. And you're constantly comparing yourself to the idea of yourself as opposed to embracing where you are.
Ooh,
and you're never going to finish.
Yeah, no.
You're never going to be like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah.
Shannon's going to be inside her coffin going, well, I wouldn't have chosen this satin, but I guess it does go true, with the dress.
Yeah. Growth is life, right? Growth is life. Curiosity is the medicine, I think, that keeps, someone said, young, but it also keeps you growing and learning and enjoying life. So,
well said.
But yeah, growth. Yeah.
All right, so let's do another one, and this one I like because this is related to the foundation idea, this idea of a team. You say healthy relationships.
Yeah. Social well-being. I think I like this term, social well-being, and it's this idea. We talk about different cultures, and what's opened my mind up to different types of relationships is my travels. It's like, you can connect with people of the opposite sex, and they won't think that you're hitting on them or flirting with them. It's an amazing concept that America wants to drill out of our heads in many ways, not everywhere, but in many ways. But I think understanding what it means to be the other half of any relationship. So what do you have to bring to it? Okay, kind, honest, respectful. There's so many different components. Those things are things you control, and those are skills that you can learn if you don't feel confident in them. And I think that's where either being honest with yourself and then maybe going to a counselor to help you build those skills is really wise, because we can't control. And that's the other thing, learning to let go. Bringing just yourself and letting them be who they are. This book I recently read called The Courage to Be Disliked.
Oh, yes. I know this one.
I love this book.
Is it Japanese author?
Yes. And I would butcher the name if I said it, so I don't want to do that. But the idea of tasks, focus on your tasks, let other people worry and deal with their tasks. And often we conflate, we focus on other people's tasks and we control, or we don't let go. And when we are not even worrying about what we should be doing. So there's so many components to being in healthy relationships, but I love that simplifying, to focus on your tasks, which are honing your skills to be a better human being, and then let go and let other people worry about their tasks.
Yeah.
And that could be work related, that could be family, that could be romantic. I mean, so many things. Yeah.
Lily, when you hear this idea of healthy relationships, what's coming to mind for you?
If you could get paid to have relationships of any kind, I think I would be a professional that person. Because in the same way that, like, is my house a mess? It's usually because it's representing what I'm feeling inside. I'm not organized in my thoughts. I'm not organized in my priorities. The health of my relationships is a reflection of where I'm at personally. And I find myself in relationship constantly where I'm reflecting beautiful things in the people that I surround myself with, and yet not necessarily hearing myself say the same things to myself. And so it's finding the interchange between generating my own self-love while also balancing the fact that love is an action and it is like a didgeridoo, and the love you put out, what you sometimes receive, and to give without expectation of receiving it. But like I'm just going to circle back because we haven't really talked about it, but I foster dogs the way that normal people date. And to me, it's a way to give, and not expect anything in return, and also be able to love something for who it is and what it is, and not need to be a part of it the rest of its life.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fitting. First of all, I'm working on a forthcoming episode on singles and pet ownership. But you two have something in common, which is your love of dogs. So as I mentioned in Shannon's bio, she has 2 dogs. Before we get to the last of the pillars that I want to talk about, when you talk about healthy relationships, Shannon, I'm guessing that it's not just human relationships.
You know, my dogs, I wrote about this early, I think my first book, how they were kind of my muse in many ways.
You open your book and you say several times, but this is not a book about dogs.
And it wasn't. But you read the book, didn't you? I don't mention them again after the intro.
I know. But the intro is about your dogs, and you keep going, hold on, I'll get to other things. But about these dogs.
I love my dogs, and I start with the dogs from being a young girl, and how they always provided comfort for me and allowed me to be myself. And as I became an adult, I finally welcomed these 2. I call them my gentlemen, Oscar and Norman. They are older, 16 and 11. And they are my companions, and they were wonderful during the pandemic. I loved my time during the pandemic because of them primarily, but also because I am someone who enjoys my own company. But they allowed me to see that it was okay to enjoy my own company. And this was during that time in my 20s when I was like, what am I supposed to do, world? And I was listening to the world tell me instead of me understanding myself. And so they came into my life in my late 20s, one when I was 26 and one when I was 30. And they let me just be me. And I know that sounds, well, no, they're dogs. How? Because they needed me, number one. And at the same time, they let me be free. I could still go and travel. I would find a good, safe friend to have them take care of them. They didn't encumber me. But at the same time, I was able to just be my total goofy self in my house with them. I mean, my dogs, I don't know. I could go on and on about them.
They don't judge, do they?
They don't judge. And I think you also have to learn their language too. So you do have to work with another heartbeat in the house. But yeah, so for me, my dogs have allowed me to find the strength to be who I've always been.
They force you to adapt because you cannot control. You can train, and there's there's absolutely respect and dynamics and expectations between the 2 of you, right? But the reality is that being a solo sets you up to also be in complete control of your environment if you so choose. And so that's isolating, and that keeps you from having relationship with really anything. So if you can surround yourself with a heartbeat of some kind, it's immediately putting you in a position of having to listen to something other than yourself.
Yeah, that which is healthy, which is necessary. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So, ironically, the thing that brought me into your space, Shannon, was an idea that I read in one of your blogs, and that was about creating a signature style.
Oh.
And I like the idea of creating a signature style. it's something that I've worked on in terms of sort of developing an appreciation for another thing that is aesthetically pleasing, and that is fashion.
Yeah.
Right? As I like to say, is fashion is art for your body. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, can you close out talking a little bit about this idea? I think you've alluded to some of it before in terms of quality over quantity, and to Lily's point, avoiding fast fashion and so on. But what does that mean to create a signature style, and how might people start to think about that?
Yeah, well, it's something that takes time, and it's something that it's not something that is going to be dictated by trends. But once you know, and it's also about accepting your body and accepting who what are your assets and honoring those and celebrating those. And I think it's deeper than just skin. And that's where the being content and at peace with yourself is important. But when you find your signature style, you're like, okay, I need this to function as in this particular profession, but I also feel most comfortable in this. But this is what makes me feel most confident. Okay, figure out what those components are. And I think effortless style is something that initially takes a lot of time, a lot of focus, and a lot of exploration.
And
but then it becomes
tailoring at
a lot of tailoring. Yeah, especially if you're really tall and you need whatever, and all sorts of things. But then it's kind of like figuring out yourself. It's easier. You can spot it. Even if there's a trend on the runway that you love, you can say, no, that's for someone else. Or if you love stripes, okay, I'm addicted to stripes. I will find a stripe and figure out a way to welcome into my closet.
Vertical or horizontal?
I do vertical, because that elongates the body. But I guess the key is it becomes simpler, and you also are able to appreciate other people's different style because you feel content and at peace and confident in your own. I initially it might appear to be expensive, but just a simple example. I had my eye on this particular dress a couple months ago, but I wasn't going to pay that price. It comes on sale during the 4th of July. I wasn't even shopping for it, but like, I love it. It was 40% off. And I already knew I would have paid full price if I had the extra money, but now I knew for sure I could afford it. And I did like it. It wasn't because it was on sale. I guess more than anything though with signature style is having the confidence to reveal exactly who you are and not let the clothes speak for you. They can be art. I love it. And I love sartorial communication. I think that is a craft and a skill, and it's a fantastic way to speak. But I think you then need to be the vocal point. I think it introduces you, but you need to give the speech. The person needs to give this, whatever it is you're presenting. But yeah, I don't know if that.
That's great. I was at a party in LA this weekend, and it was one of these like daytime parties, pool party-esque kind of thing, but not the kind of pretentious ones that you imagine. But there were some people there. I actually was talking to a friend, and we were sort of pointing out some of the outfits that people had chosen and how great they were for those people. And how, like how I would or she would have had a hard time pulling that look off. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't because we didn't have the right body or anything like that. It's just, at least in my case, I wouldn't have felt comfortable in those clothes. And because I wouldn't have felt comfortable in those clothes, it wouldn't have looked the same. It wouldn't have looked in that way.
You carry yourself different when you feel good in your clothes.
And so this is a big callback to a previous episode. I have an episode called Clothing the Solo, where I talked to a friend who's helped me, make some decisions. I tell a story about this blue suit with gray. I wear a gray belt, gray shoes, gray socks with it. So it's something I would never think to do, but she gently shoved me into that world. And so at first I was uncomfortable with it, but then I started to notice like that was the suit, that was the look that I got the most compliments on. Mm-hmm. And then once those compliments started coming, guess what? Now I was communicating sartorially, as you say. Yeah. And then I got more compliments because now I'm not just wearing it, I'm wearing it. Yeah. And so I'm standing up a little taller. I'm a little, I just feel a little better. That started to become like,
it gelled.
More of, as you would say, signature.
Way to be open and vulnerable and hear the suggestion and receive it. That's relationship.
She's an expert and I'm not.
But that's
You
a
sought out
relationship.
expertise.
Yeah, expertise, right?
Oh, there you too.
That's right. She called it fashion forward. Lily, how would you describe your signature style?
It's been somewhere between granny chic and like, I don't know. I'm an athlete, and I also have, you walk into my house, and I had a couple clients that in their own words would say, like, in the inside of a jewelry box with the little ballerina, that's what it feels like in your house.
That's amazing.
And my uncle, Peter, you saw my house back in LA. My uncle came over and goes, "This is totally Lily."
That's great. Yes. A granny chic meets sporty spice.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Sardonic spice. That's what it is. It's sporty sardonic spice.
That's outstanding. So, Shannon, thank you for your time for doing this. I appreciate it. Lily, as always, you're a delight to have
I love you, man.
on here.
Thanks for having me.
I think one of the big takeaways, I love this idea of, again, as a solo, you get to make these decisions, often less encumbered, and to think about how might you embrace more positivity in your life in a daily way, in a way that is sort of simple and is authentic, right? That is, you're not playing a status game. And the nice thing is that you can develop these things with a sort of thoughtful approach to it. And as I said, there's no one way to do it. You get to choose your tact. And with that,
Exactly.
I'll say thank you.
And also, what's everyone's pants situation?
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. For more about our guests and show notes, go to petermcgraw.org. Please subscribe and share with your single friends.